The man of tomorrow is here for your Zomia ONE Underground Q&A, coming out a day late. It was originally going to come out Wednesday. Of course, usually it comes out on Wednesday. But one of those situations where I had to come out on a Thursday, and let me tell you why, because I was coming down from a sugar high from drinking Surge. No, I'm kidding. Of course, we read the Surge reviews on this week's Sovereign Tech. And look, let's just get this out of the way. That everything that I read about Surge is total bullshit. It doesn't even have that much caffeine. I think it had like 67 milligrams of caffeine. I mean, my pre-workout has like shy of 300 milligrams. I mean, that's barely a cup of tea, barely a cup of coffee. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about with Surge being such a big deal. I mean, I guess it's the sugar, because there's tons and tons of grams of sugar. I mean, there's just a shit ton, but then you come down from that and, oh hell, it's all over. So anyway, did try Surge. I almost took a picture of it and shared it on Twitter. But look, folks, just the reality is Surge is not going to make you feel like a god, in case you thought that would actually happen to you after hearing the review that I read, which is just a hilarious review. That was a little problematic, gonna admit that. But anyway, it was funny, and it got the point across. And I really do love doing that segment. So where we do the online review of the week, I'm going to try and keep that going, even if that means I have to extend the show. Did get some feedback from some of you when I had mentioned at the beginning of the recent Sovereign Tech episode. Was that episode 322? At the beginning of that, where I said, we might have to bump the show up to an hour and a half, or to what I like better calling 90 minutes. Okay, like that makes it sound a little shorter, even though it's longer, but do like 90 minutes. And that might be what we need to be able to fit everything in, for a few different reasons. But, like I said, the hour format, 60 minutes, it's an experiment. We're trying it out, see how it works. But like a part of me is finding out, well, there's a reason because at one point I also bumped it up to 90 minutes, and then it turned into 2 hours. Okay. But I'm starting to realize, there's a reason we bumped it up to 90 minutes in the first place, and then eventually went to 2 hours. But I thought that would, well, anyway, we'll see what happens with that. I'm not going to talk about that for the next hour. But something of interest that happened this morning, as this is getting recorded, is Julian Assange was arrested in London. And there was some, let's be clear here. I've been critical of Julian Assange. I've been critical of WikiLeaks on Sovereign Tech, even though I absolutely have been in the cypherpunk community for a very, very long time. I have my critiques. Bottom line being, and we might talk about this as more news comes out. This is not something you want to jump and rush out and talk about. To see, and you did. You saw, because he's been since 2012, he's been in the Ecuadorian embassy, right, in England. To see the Ecuadorian ambassador pretty much like wave in the UK secret police was disturbing, to say the least, because, it's not a shock for me. Of course, I'm an anarchist, and I think a lot of the people listening to this are anarchists, not all, but quite a few. And that is like, there's no point to playing the legal mumbo jumbo game and thinking somehow you're, because you're finding refuge with one government, that you're safe from another. At the end of the day, they're all going to play ball with each other in one form or, in some form or fashion. Because when something actually, and I'm not saying Assange does, but when something actually threatens the very concept of government authority, every government is going to be on the side of every other government at that point. And so, this just proves the point. It wasn't, I don't know if any of you saw the video. They put on the video. Like, I'm just going to say this here. Like I said, we got to wait for more of this to come out. They made him, it's almost like he knew this was going to happen, because he looked, he's only like, what is he, 47? He's not even 50. He looked like Noah coming out of that damn thing. He had the huge beard and everything. He looked like a 60, 70-year-old man coming out of there. And it was almost like, oh, the police are beating up the old man. Or something. Like, I don't grasp it, because, I've seen pictures of him from just about a year ago. And he looked, or a couple of years ago, I should say, 2017, because then there's, we could really talk about all this now, couldn't we? But at the time, there were questions, of course, in 2016, whether or not Julian Assange is actually Julian Assange anymore. like if that's the same guy. I mean, I'm just going to say it, like the guy that we saw getting taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy looked odd, but that's all I got. I'm just going to say that. I'm not making any bold claims. I am just saying, that's all I've got is okay, just that. So there you have it. Anyway, the Assange thing, as more information comes out, we'll get into that. I don't know if any of you remember that. Remember, there's a big conspiracy theory that Julian Assange is actually dead and that the person that they have is not really him. Now, I mean, these kinds of conspiracy theories come up for all kinds of major figures. Of course, the recently passed Stephen Hawking. A lot of people think that he wasn't actually Stephen Hawking, hasn't been Stephen Hawking for decades. Of course, you have Paul McCartney. That might be one of the more famous ones, is that Paul McCartney really isn't Paul McCartney. He's another person, and so on. So, these kinds of theories come up. They're not new. They've been around for a good long while. But anyway, we're going to leave all that at that. But speaking of like really amazing news, and something I'll mention here, because if you haven't seen it, you got to see it. But I will mention it on Sovereign Tech this week. And that is, that picture of the supermassive black hole. I mean, literally, you're seeing a picture of a black hole in action. And the story around it alone is what it took to get that picture, to take that shot, the amount of data, everything about it. Incredible, absolutely incredible. In fact, was OMG Ubuntu. They're a really fun Linux news site that I frequent often. They're like, well, it was nice to see some Ubuntu laptops, involved in the process of getting that picture. And I was like, yeah, no, that's cool. Use Linux hashtag. But anyway, if you haven't seen that, actually, you can go on my Twitter account and you can see it. And yes, I've been relatively active on Twitter as late. Mainly because got to have, or we don't have to, but we're going to have that with helping out the network. And I actually have some interesting ideas that I'm going to try out that makes it where it's not really social media, where I use it more as something else. And so it's also a great place to get announcements. Like I announced that this episode will be coming out today instead of yesterday on there. So it's a great place to keep updated. All right. Another thing I want to bring up quick. And actually, I'm going to get to the same person. He asked a great question that we'll get into for this week's Q&A, tech question. But he actually created a scraper for Zomia ONE so that you can, implement, you can get all the content on whatever, podcast app you want to use. I think he's tested it on AntennaPod and a few others. But anyway, I'm going to be looking into that more. Other people I know are engaging in various efforts to be able to get, including, the Zomia ONE. If you just want Zomia ONE, you can just use the XML feed that Podbean offers, right? But to get the other content, to get the exclusive content for the Zomia ONE Underground, that's a little trickier. And I know a few of you are trying different efforts to make that happen. And I will be testing a lot of these out, and honestly, we'll make some of them official. But the most important thing to say is that whether it was meant for mass consumption or not, I am so honored by any of you wanting to make sure that you're getting this content in the way that you want to get it, and that you take it that serious. So like, no, I'm going to get it on, in the way that I like to consume my shit. And you're doing whatever it takes, whatever coding work, whatever you got to do to make it happen. I'm beyond honored by that. Like that's phenomenal. So, really anybody that creates content can't ask for, I think, a higher compliment than people writing, basically writing code to make sure they get your content and have it available in alternative ways. That's just so fucking awesome. So thank you. And I will be talking more about those in the near future. So, okay. Why don't we got all that out of the way. We have a phenomenal Elm of the Week this week. Can't wait to talk to you about that. It's not Beast in Black, but then what is? And of course, some of you have also messaged me and said, wow, that Beast in Black, we're all over that stuff, baby. And hell yeah. But anyway, we got a good album to talk about this week, but let's get into some questions here. This one's actually a response from Jim Jesus of the Lulberts, a response to my opening topic from this week, which was about creativity and sleep. Well, really, it was like 10 different things you might not have known about how your brain works. And a couple of them I thought were bullshit. I completely disagreed. Granted, the story was from 2013. So in the past 6 years or so, things could have changed. But regardless, creativity, let's talk about this. So here's Jim Jesus, somebody who definitely puts out content, very creative, very active guy. And I know he works, he really works and does well. He does it, I should say. Anyway, let's see. When I'm sleepy, I'm really bad at trying to get stuff together to write scripts for videos, compile topics for podcasts, or record anything. Okay, so I'm going to read that again. When I'm sleepy, I'm really bad at trying to get stuff together to write scripts for videos, compile topics for podcasts, or record anything. What I can do, and will get stuck on doing when I'm having bouts of insomnia, is make art, logos for my projects, or make animations for my videos. So I want to break in a little bit on this. So yeah, because what I was saying is that, I can't write when I'm tired. I can't, just can't process information like that. And he basically said the same thing, is that he can't, he'd be really bad at getting scripts for videos done or compiling topics for podcasts or record or whatever. So anyway, though I'll admit I've had fun but it's fun. And I know where not that it's lackluster, but where I have a different presentation style. There's been plenty of times where I've recorded at like 2 a.m. in the morning. I do that all the time. If it's 2 a.m., you know what fucking time it is. It's not of course, it's in the morning. Sorry. So it is not 2 a.m. right now. And so I shouldn't be making little verbal flubs like that, but that's what I'll do is I'll make verbal flubs at 2 a.m. And it's, anyway, it happens. So, but it's kind of fun. Like there's a different flavor. You're almost, like there's this old concept of being drunk tired, right? Where like you're so tired, you're almost acting perhaps like you're drunk in a way. So even though I'm straight edge anyway, so let's see, if it wasn't for me not being able to sleep after a long run at work, after only getting 2 or so hours of sleep before I'd never have made my first Memphis design, some video. Okay. All of the improvements and various artwork I made for and around it all came from, quote, fuck it, I'll sleep later, end quote, moments, including my POG designs. I've included some examples. You're welcome. And he actually sent me some of his POG designs, and some of these are fucking hilarious. It's like Molyneux on him and all this shit. So Jim Jesus, of course, also asked about the Pogs. And I'm like, wait, are Pogs coming back? Well, I guess he's making them come back. God damn it. And you can probably get Lulbert's Pogs, at his website. So anyway, but they did look really cool. And actually the video that he showed me was pure 90s Saved by the Bell beauty. I mean, it was so cool. So I guess maybe there's certain types of art that you can be really creative with and kind of put together at that time. And maybe that falls more in line with what that story was saying, where you can have some kind of like really abstract thoughts, because, what Jim Jesus was showing me was really abstract shit. So, I mean, really, but it's great. I can't even do that. But granted, I'm not that kind of artista, like I'm not that kind of, I don't know. I guess there's a reason I don't really do video hardcore. I mean, well, there's reasons I don't do it right now. But also, there's reasons why. I mean, I have an idea of how to do it, but here's the thing with me and the way that I create art, I am only good at really like 2 types of art. And well, I don't know if that's fair to say, but I have very specific types of art that I'm particularly good at. Like I'm good at being over the top and cheesy and kind of corny, even though I think that that's a good thing. I don't think that that's a bad thing or a negative. I'm good at campy. Like I'm really good at that, but I think that has its own merits that are worthwhile. And obviously I'm good at very straight to head. And so, but there's people who are far more into the, like, the comedic, the sarcastic, the sardonic kind of art and all that. I'm not really, that's not exactly my style. Or I guess actually technically in art, I suppose they would call it ironic, even though that wouldn't exactly be the dictionary definition of it, but it would be, but that's the phrase or the term you would use for that. So, maybe if people are more into that, or more into the abstract, more into the, I don't know, Jackson Pollock kind of stuff. Maybe that works better for you in the middle of the night, but me, no, not at all. So anyway, yeah, love the Pog designs, Jim Deezus. Right on, baby. Nice one on that. And that video looks so slick. I mean, I love it, like that's the funny thing, right? So I'm pretty much a walking 80s and 90s encyclopedia, and I love all that style. I would have never came up with that shit though. Like in my own head, I would have never ever came up with those designs. Like even something as ridiculous as the lasers behind you in a school picture. I just would have never thought of that crap, and it was funny is that's considered cheesy, and I consider myself a master of cheesy, and I just would have never thought of that shit. I don't know. I think my cheesy just has like more meaning as to where really for something to be viral, it has to have pretty much no meaning whatsoever. Okay. Or it has to be able to appeal to everyone, which inherently means it really has no meaning and nothing really behind it. So as much as I love those kinds of like Saved by the Bell designs, like I don't have the head for that kind of shit, I mean, I just don't. So, I mean, not to say, again, there's a bunch of different types of artists, right? Just like, sure, I make music, but my music is very different from what, actually it's very different from the music I generally listen to. It's very different from, a lot of what other people make. There's a bunch of different styles, right? In any kind of creativity, and that's a beautiful thing. So anyway, I asked for feedback on the tired thing and I got it. And I think maybe I can see more where that's why I said, what does creativity mean? That's why I asked the question at the beginning of the episode. Like, what does creativity mean to the person writing this article? Because for me, I can't do my kind of creativity, and it's absolutely creative, but I can't do that when I'm tired. But maybe some other stuff. Yeah, I could see that. And certainly Jim Jesus is on with that too. So anyway, good to get the feedback. I appreciate it. All right, let's move on to another question here. So this one actually, well, how about we just get into it? But then we do have a tech question to get into as well. Let's see. Hey, man of tomorrow, I might be in the minority on this, but I love when you talk about fitness, exercise, general, and mental health. Really wish you would do that more, especially on the Prime show. Okay, couple things, quick. Yes, I think you are in the minority, but also, yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like, I know what you mean by Prime show. Again, as a reminder to people, I'm going to get used to, I need to get used to just calling it Sovereign Tech, right? Because now this isn't the Sovereign Tech Q&A anymore. It's the Zomia ONE Underground Q&A. But anyway, so, and because of that, though, also now it's far more fitting for me to talk about, more of these, mental health stuff I think can fit on Sovereign Tech, and general fitness can too. I'm not saying it can't. But yeah, usually I steer clear of that on Sovereign Tech proper, or on Sovereign Tech. See, I did it again. But regardless, I'm honored. I'm glad that you like hearing about that. And, anyway, we'll see where that fits in more in the future. Let's read on here. A question for the Q&A though. I know you've recently mentioned you've been going to the gym. What equipment do you use there? I've heard you talk about a home gym in the past, but do you just go in there with shorts and a tank top and headphones, or what? Shoes? Would you be willing to share a picture? Okay. So a lot of questions in there actually, and I won't spend a ton of time on this because there's not a whole ton to say. Yes, I wear shoes. But well, anyway, all right, let me break into this. So yeah, I have been going to, I actually have a Planet Fitness subscription, very inexpensive. I have been taking advantage of that quite a bit because I don't have a home gym, now. So, which is, fine. And, I've been using Planet Fitness, and again, like really Planet Fitness, I know a lot of people effectively want to say that Planet Fitness is for people who aren't like serious bodybuilders, etc. I don't agree with the sentiment. I mean, everybody starts somewhere, and you can go so far. And I don't mean you can just go so far. No, I mean you can go so far with what Planet Fitness has as far as getting very bulky, getting, good size on you, and good strength, of course. I mean, you can really, really go a good distance at Planet Fitness. And and I said this before, when you have gotten beyond the weights that are available at Planet Fitness, again, they only go up to, as far as dumbbells, they only go up to 75 pounds. Then when you get beyond all of that, well, then you just go get a subscription at another gym. but you can really, really get, in my opinion, I think you can get depending upon what your goals are, and everybody has different goals, and at Planet Fitness, certainly everybody has different goals. But if you're going for size, if you want, like me, you want to be a monster, right? You just want to be huge. You can get really big at Planet Fitness, and yes, you can. And even actually, honestly, if you supplemented with some outdoorsy, workouts, I think you could go really far with what Planet Fitness has to offer. There's some machines there when I go there right now or there's some machines and some equipment where I'm maxing out, but still by and large, Planet Fitness makes a lot of sense for me, and there's a lot of things to work out for me to work out a lot of different body parts. Cause again, I do spot training, right? Where, I am doing very specific muscle groups every day. It's not like I go in and do full body every day. I don't do upper body one day, lower body the next. I've covered all of this in my fitness specials, but and I can't imagine a time where I won't do that kind of spot training where I'm concentrating on specific muscle groups on a certain day. But anyway, there's a lot of convenience that comes with, especially, since there's a Planet Fitness everywhere, there's so much convenience that comes with that. So I'm not knocking it at all. And I think it's unfair for people to make fun of those gyms, in any way, because some people, their fitness goals, Planet Fitness is all they're ever going to need. And, Satan bless them. I think that's wonderful. I'm always amazed the amount of older people there, people in their 60s and up, or hell, even way, way up. I see them in there, they're hitting the Smith machines and everything. I'm like, fuck yeah, good for you. And not that anybody has to do this sort of stuff. Like I always say, if you want to go through life, with a bag of Doritos on the couch, you've got no judgment from me, baby. You rock and roll. Okay. But regardless, all right, it is impressive to see what they have going on there. So Planet Fitness, again, okay. Is that your end game, Planet Fitness? Maybe not. But it is a stepping stone. It is like a great place and an expensive place, because you go to some of those other gyms, the Gold's Gym, things like this, or even maybe the UFC gyms or something, even though that's kind of a different animal. They get pretty expensive, very quickly, as to where Planet Fitness is not at all. So yeah, go ahead and, get started with Planet Fitness. That's fine. Anyway, what equipment do I use there? I guess, because because are machines. There's nothing like, I'm not going to list off every machine that they offer and all that stuff. I use dumbbells a lot anyway, for so many things, so many workouts that I do for whatever muscle group. If you mean what equipment do I walk in with? I'm pretty easy about it. Like you said, I do wear shoes. I'm wearing Rock Ones. Those are the Rocks, of course. His shoes, they are not, I had an interesting thought about this too. So, because recently, and I talked about this on a Q&A, where The Rock did a product drop, a couple weeks ago with Under Armour. And now, when I walk into the gym, anything that I am wearing or carrying with me is probably something for The Rock, and it has his bull symbol on it and everything, because over the years, or over the past couple of years, I've acquired pretty much any time he did do a product drop, he'd have something interesting, something that made sense, something that it wasn't just a t-shirt, it was something that actually improved your training. I would jump on that, because I believed him in that if it worked for him, okay. And Grant, I talked about this before, that I recognized that he's really, there's a million ways in which he's just engaging in pure marketing. I thought his most recent product drop, pretty much sucked. But regardless, okay, yeah, there was one time, and I thought it was really cool. There was back in December, I think. He shared a picture on Instagram where he was wearing a Motley Crue shirt. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah. And and that's not that crazy. Motley Crue's been on Raw. He's been on Monday Night Raw for WWE years ago. I was like, oh, well, that's cool that he listens to Motley Crue. And there's times where he shows, videos of him working out and he's listening to whatever music, and he'll listen to metal or something like that. But then I was like, oh, you know what? Because he has deals with Netflix. That was just marketing ahead of the game for the new Motley Crue movie, The Dirt, which, by the way, I will be reviewing on the Hard and Fast podcast, which there's going to be a few episodes of that'll come out at once. So you're going to get overloaded with that. And then, but that's because there's so much content that I have to come out with that's a show that might not be monthly. That's a show where things have to come out quite a bit or come out far more often because I have so many interviews and so many different things to put together for it. It's just like editing it to where, the process comes into play with it. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. So let's move on to, let's keep talking about equipment. So with equipment, like I said, I do have the Rock Ones that I wear for shoes, which are specifically, and this is kind of a rarity. They are weightlifting shoes or training shoes. They are not running shoes. In fact, not at all, because they are fairly slick on anything other than the usual floor you'd get at a gym. So you want to be careful with that. They're not something you always want to be wearing outside, in my opinion. I like the flatness of the sole on them, but again, they are, or kind of the one piece underneath, but they are kind of basic. Now, you don't have to go out and buy a pair of Rock Ones, okay, to be able to do that. Before that, I was wearing a pair of Rock Deltas, which are also those are all Under Armour shoes. I was wearing those. Those are more of a running shoe, though. And are shoes that big of a deal? Maybe not. But I think when you're doing squats or on leg day, and some other aspects of training, they can be a very important deal. A very basic shoe to go with, and that you could go to Gold's Gym, you could go to Venice Beach, whatever, and you're going to see guys wearing these, is a pair of Chuck Taylors, Converse Chuck Taylors. Weightlifters have been wearing those, and those are basketball shoes, but weightlifters have been wearing those forever because of the flatness and the singular piece of the sole that they don't break up on you. That's something to consider too. And I did that for years before, there was somebody out there who I actually trusted when they said they were selling a training shoe, that it was the real deal. Now, granted, I don't so much trust the Rock anymore, like I said, because, he's part of a marketing machine now, and it's not just like what he's selling either. And like that Motley Crue shirt thing, like even that I call bullshit on. It's true. I think that he was just kind of almost predictive programming for the Motley Crue movie to come out, because the news cycle hadn't started around that yet. And so many websites engage in this and native advertising, basically. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about the Rock. I want to answer your question, then we'll get on to the tech question. So anyway, he has the Rock, was it the Phantoms? I think they're called. They're an Under Armour shoe. Now that's a running shoe. That's not a training shoe. That's a running shoe. There's a very specific way that the heel of it and the sole all comes down. Really, that is absolutely a running shoe. And my complaint about it, and they had a tech angle to it when I first saw it, or is the hovers, right? The Phantom hovers or whatever. Anyway, was that they had a fucking Bluetooth device in them. And I'm like, you're not going to get Bluetooth in my goddamn shoes. Like, you're kidding me. No way. I have no interest in that. Now, after I thought about that, okay, now I didn't go out and buy a pair of hovers. No. Okay. But the hovers, the idea of having like a little Bluetooth device in your shoes, I got thinking about that, and I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, if what they put in your shoes was basically what was it that Open Garden came out with a few years ago? It's like the Greenstone or something like that it was called, that they were giving out at like festivals and everything, to where it allowed you to use Open Garden or Fire Chat to communicate like throughout a festival. And it worked as like, if you didn't have an internet or cell phone connection or a cellular connection of some kind, you could just bounce off of these little Greenstone repeaters. And I was like, oh, a really cool idea for a mesh network would be to put little repeaters in the soles of everybody's shoes, and then, you'd have Wi-Fi signal fucking or, whatever radio signal you're using for data transmission, you'd have it everywhere. Again, you'd want to like somehow randomize, maybe, you'd have to have some kind of ID, but somehow maybe randomize like the MAC ID anyway, there's ways that you'd have to do it to where it could truly be anonymous. But I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. That way, you don't have to carry around a smartphone. You don't have to carry around anything, but you could have a mesh network kind of going everywhere, because it's just in everybody's shoes. And if there's enough people around, who'd care. And and most people aren't like necessarily going to take off their shoes unless they're into flip-flops or sandals, but even then you could put them in those. And you could make them pretty rugged and tough. I think there's something there, but it just struck me when I was thinking about these hovers. I'm like, I don't want Bluetooth in my shoes. But then I thought about it. I'm like, but if it was like anonymous and randomized and like everybody was wearing these, you'd have internet connection just bouncing around all over the place. And well, anyway, or, you'd have a mesh network, I should say, not internet, because fuck the internet, but you'd have mesh network, mesh network going all over the place. And then, yeah, cool idea. So anyway, that's just something that came to mind for me. I can think of some ways to solve or to implement the anonymity aspects to that, but there it is. So, okay. But let me continue on. So I mentioned the shoes. I wear Rock Ones, but again, you could get away with a, $40, $30 pair of Chuck Taylors, whatever that happens to be. I have a bit of a hard time with this. I've been off and on with wearing training gloves, finger cut off gloves. Some people just want to use chalk or whatever. I've been off and on with the training gloves. Sometimes it's hard for me to find a good pair of training gloves that actually fit well, because I have double XL hands and not everybody offers their training gloves in double XL, believe it or not. I mean, I would think that's ridiculous because most bodybuilders are my size, 6'1" and all this. But it can actually be a challenge. So, so, I mean, you can do training gloves. Sometimes if I'm doing squats or things like that, I will wear, I'll wear a wrist strap. For that sort of stuff. But, I mean, at the same time, if you have like machines and it's not a home gym, you don't always need a lot of that, because a lot of where, like, say, a wrist strap would be protecting you might be where you're lifting the dumbbells or bringing up the bar or something like that. A lot of that gets offset by the machine itself, and so you don't have to worry so much, about doing funny wrist movements and you're really targeting. Now, I mean, but there's disadvantages if you're just using machines and you're not taking advantage of all the kind of, the shall we say, almost uneven distribution of weight and kind of the more natural movement of your arms and everything, where they're not moving at exactly the same time like they would on a machine and so on. So, there's arguments to go both ways on that. But sometimes I'll implement those things, but they're not really needed. And you really should only, in my opinion, you should only use wrist straps if you're dealing with some serious weight. I see people there who are wearing them and, everybody's different. Who knows? Maybe they have weak wrists. I have no idea, but like they're not doing exercises that, as far as I can see, where like they would require a good hard wrist strap. Sometimes I think people just wear them to look cool. And hey, there's something to be said for looking cool too. I mean, you can feel good. I mean, people talk about, there's actually research behind that like, just getting some new gym equipment and going to, can really help out your gym performance, because you're excited, you're starting off fresh. It's just like the same idea. You buy a new computer and like, all right, yeah, here we go. I'm going to go kick some ass with this computer, and because it's the new thing, it kind of excites you and you're exploring and your brain is engaged in new ways. So there's something to be said for that, as far as that goes. But anyway, I wear, since you asked on the clothes specifically, do I wear short and tank tops? I wear shorts. I don't always wear tank tops, but I do wear shorts. But often I'll just wear, kind of an oversized shirt. I don't need to impress anybody at the gym. When I go to the gym, like, I mean, you see guys, they're wearing really form-fitting clothing and all that. And again, whatever makes you feel good and feel better about your workout and stuff like that, like that's what really matters. But me, I'm not there to shine anybody on. I go in, here's another piece of equipment. Of course, I have my my Project Rock headphones, which I've reviewed. I told you there's a ton of rock shit. Anyway, I have my Project Rock headphones that I have on. I go in there wearing my jacket. I mean, I'm ready to go inside of a minute. I go lock up my, I lock up my jacket and whatever in the locker, and, I have my water bottle, and I go out and I just, I get right into it. There's no lines, no waiting. I just make it happen. And, but point being is that, like, you can see when some people at the gym are like, okay, they're trying to impress somebody, and I am not. Like if it were colder, it's warming up here in nice Planet Zero in New Hampshire. And if it were colder, like I'd probably have the hoodie on, the whole thing. I do wear a hat, right? I have a hat, and that's basically for the sweat, really, more than anything. But I go in there, like that, and just I shut out everybody else around me. I don't get in anybody's way, but I just shut them out, and I'm not there to impress anyone. I go in and I'm just zeroed in. doing the workout, going for an hour, 2 hours, whatever the workout for the day requires, and just making it happen. I like to imagine, just going into a dungeon or something like that. And I've talked about the importance of or what I consider the importance of role playing, when you work out, I don't know, imagine yourself, you're doing something else or what your reason is for doing this and so on. And, playing a mental game in the gym can be so huge, in getting you that next rep in, or just in general, getting you excited about what you're doing. So, I don't care what that is. If you want to go in there imagining you're Conan the Barbarian or something, fuck, do it. I think that's tremendous. So yeah, basically to answer your question, all right. Well, let me get the last question, which is, would I share a picture? I've shared pictures before, like on Patreon, back when I was on Patreon. There's pictures of me working out. I could share one from recently, but is there improvement? Yes. Am I bigger? Yes. Than the last pictures I've shared? Sure. But I don't know. It's not like the most exciting thing in the world, but regardless, maybe I'll see. And that's actually, Podbean might actually allow me to share pictures within the show notes. So anyway, that's maybe for the future. I'll think about doing that sort of thing, but thank you for asking. I'm genuinely, I'm honored and blushing a little bit. Yeah, so I go in there very slim, I'm not carrying much. Again, I take my jacket off and I'm good to go. But, I have my shoes on, got my, shoes, shorts, loose fitting shirt, whatever, and headphones, hat, and sometimes I wear training gloves or wrist straps, but most of the time, generally I don't. Though I am kind of getting to the point where wrist straps would probably be a good idea for me to use more regularly. But that's it. Very, very, I keep it very basic. I'm not going in with weightlifting belts or anything like that. In fact, I'm not to say those things don't have their place. They most certainly do. But most of that stuff you don't start wearing until you're dealing in the multi-hundreds of pounds. That's when you start considering wearing a lot of that stuff. And even then, and you don't want to wear it before, because the part of the idea is that you want to build up every part of your body to get used to handling these heavy loads. And if you start wearing assists, unless you need it because of a medical condition, of course, but if you start wearing assistant accessories, wrist straps, weightlifting belts, and all this very early on, your body's not going to be able to actually handle the loads, or, you're not going to have as strong an overall core and as strong an overall body because of that. Later on, again, when you're dealing in hundreds of pounds and all this, sometimes you have to wear that stuff. I'm not saying you don't, but you really, those are for when you're feeling it. Those are very much last resort. And like I said, you're generally dealing in the multi-hundreds of pounds before you're doing any of that. So I keep it very lean and mean. I just want to get in there, lift some heavy shit, put it down, and go. And come and record some podcasts. So. So there you go. I hope that answered your question to satisfaction. If not, if you have anything else specific you want to ask, please go for it. But yeah, understand some of the best equipment you've got is your mental game when you go in there. Go in there, pay no attention. Don't treat it like a fucking social club. You don't need to be tweeting from the gym or whatever, or you don't need to be doing whatever from the gym. Just go in there, just keep focused, and, play the role play in your head if you want, whatever, and just make it fucking happen. And that's going to do more for you than any wrist straps, than any fancy gadgetry, or whatever the fuck, that gets schlepped off to you. Playing a great mental game is going to do far better than, you having an app connected to your shoes at the gym or something. Holy shit. Anyway. Okay. So speaking of tech, let's get into a tech question here, and then we're going to get into our album pick of the week. So here we go. Question for the Q&A. I am a longtime AirVPN user and have never had any reason to dislike their service or distrust their data non-retention policy. That being said, my trust of this service is based purely on their word rather than on real-world testing. That being said, the AirVPN devs, like Private Internet Access, are known hacktivists with a solid reputation. So I'm going to stop there for a second and comment on this. Anyway, so AirVPN is actually the number 2 VPN that I have recommended over the years, primarily. I've had other VPN companies which were just fine that were sponsors in the past that, believe me, if I thought they were dangerous, I wouldn't have recommended them. Okay. But anyway, private internet access is kind of my top one. It's the one I use, but I've always said AirVPN is not a bad idea either. Now, part of the reason, so I want to break this down a little bit. And this person mentioned that private internet access has the same attitude as AirVPN, and I appreciate that. So there's an old sovereign tech maxim, shall we say, where you don't follow the money, you follow the attitude. Okay. Money comes from all kinds of places. And like I said, if you put a heat map of government money on the planet, it's everywhere. So you can't really avoid that. But as far as attitude goes, very different story. A lot of anti-government attitude around the world, especially in the tech space. And there really is. And it's growing, thankfully. So, AirVPN, private internet access, a lot of hacktivists, a lot of guys that have the right attitude. They genuinely care about anonymity, zero logs, all the good stuff that we want in a VPN. And they accept cryptocurrencies and so on. In fact, even like PIA, I don't know about, I don't recall if AirVPN does this. It doesn't matter. Because they're both great. I have no problem recommending either. Like private internet access even takes shielded Zcash transactions, which I think is fucking awesome. So anyway, AirVPN, the one advantage that I gave to AirVPN was that it was not a U.S. company, as to where private internet access is, even though it's under like London Trust Media or whatever. But regardless, like the servers, some servers are based in America. I mean, for VPN, servers are based everywhere, but you get my point. With AirVPN, that's not the case. Now, the thing is ever since the Cloud Act, all of that talk, this kind of speaks to what we were saying about Assange earlier. All of that talk that even I've engaged in over the years on the show, granted things change. I mean, Sovereign Tech's been going 7 years. Are there things that have changed in 7 years? You bet your ass there is. All right. So I'm not contradicting, just things have changed. With the Cloud Act, now really there's no server, basically, there's no server safe from the United States around the world. So to effectively, say that, well, because they're based in Europe, it'll be harder to, for the U.S. to ask for requisition of, logs or lack thereof, or to hand over servers and all that. That is just no longer true. It's just no longer true. And I don't know if the Microsoft and like the email server in Ireland case where Microsoft was winning against the DOJ is what led to the Cloud Act getting passed. We covered that case for years on the show. But whatever, the Cloud Act basically makes all of that pointless. So there's nothing wrong with AirVPN, but then there's no real advantage to AirVPN anymore either, in my opinion. Because the Cloud Act basically gave America access to, every server around the world with the same laws that gave them basically instantaneous access to every server in the United States. Anyway, I'm being very, very broad in that, description, but the interpretation stands. So, all right, let's read on with this. And do I, at the end of this email, am I still recommending private internet access and AirVPN? Absolutely. But let's read on. I recently watched a video on ExpressVPN, which pointed this case, and there's a link, I'll put the link in the show notes, where the Turkish government confiscated some ExpressVPN servers as part of a murder investigation and did not find any information. Supposedly, this is because their OpenVPN implementation, in addition to not having any logs, lives entirely on a RAM disk instead of physical media. ExpressVPN otherwise seems to be a pretty generic pop-up VPN service whose devs have no public philosophical position. What are your thoughts on this? Is this type of story something that gives credence to a VPN non-retention policy, or is it just anecdotal? In general, I have always agreed with your advice on using the philosophy of a business devs as a major deciding factor. What I love about AirVPN and private internet access, that's I'm saying that. But in this case, would it be better to trust the faceless company that has a proven track record, at least in this isolated case? Okay, so yeah, first off, right move, store it on a RAM disk. That way, as soon as you turn off the server, boop, everything's gone, right? But anyway, yeah, so I read about the story. That was very interesting. So ExpressVPN is one that's been around for a little bit. They're not too much of a pop-up. And they are also sponsors of Security Now, my favorite podcast, with Steve Gibson. And Steve Gibson will not let, anybody that's bullshitting he has really basically Steve Gibson. In fact, he's talked about VPNs recently. Steve Gibson has very strict standards, particularly when it comes to security. Obviously, he does a Security Now podcast. And I personally believe that he would not allow ExpressVPN to advertise on the show if it was doing something wrong. In fact, previously he had ProXPN was a VPN sponsor for Security Now. They were also a VPN sponsor, or they were also sponsored for Sovereign Tech at one point. But ProXPN, he basically told him, look, if you want to sponsor my show, you can't keep logs. Now, granted, you're kind of taking here's the rub with all of this, and this is true for AirVPN. This is true for private internet access. It's true for a lot of them. Okay, that is that you're really just trusting them that they're not keeping any kinds of logs. Now, it looks like with ExpressVPN that was absolutely true. They were not holding on to logs whatsoever, and they were putting it on a RAM disk. Just because it's on a RAM disk doesn't mean you can't keep logs. You sure as hell could, because what's happening could just get stored elsewhere or registered, in a log file. But regardless of that, okay, so would you run with ExpressVPN since it has more of a proven track record? I think if you went with any of these three, you'd be fine. Because a VPN isn't the only thing. Like if you're doing, what's the term that we want to use for this? If you're doing hardcore shit, let's put it that way. Okay. And we mean that in sovereign tech terms. Okay. In anonymity and privacy security terms, a VPN is not the only, batter in your cake. Okay. So, any of these three would really do fine, as far as that goes. I think, ExpressVPN, I looked into them a little deeper. Okay. After I got this email, and I didn't really see any red flags, nothing really, but also I don't know that the people that are there, that they are really on point as far as being, say, hacktivists, or so on. But yeah, I think sticking with any of those three would probably be pretty good. This speaks well of ExpressVPN, but it does feel let's just be clear here, for right now, it does feel like an isolated case. And while I appreciate that they are a sponsor for Security Now, they have not been sponsoring, shall we say, more extreme events as far as I know. And that's one of the things I've loved about private internet access, is that they have sponsored a lot of Bitcoin conferences at a time when Bitcoin was very extreme, very anti-authority, and so on. They were there. They've happily been on shows that are very anti-authority. As for, I don't know that ExpressVPN would do the same thing. Even if, again, this gets into not even technicals. All right. Like I said, this could be just an isolated case, and that's great that nothing was found on those. Murder's not great. No, by no means. And people who know me know how I feel about that, or about lethality in any way. But, kudos that sort of thing, that sort of thing happens where it's proven that there were no logs kept. But at the same time, there's something to be said for giving money to companies that are also supportive of events, ideologies, maybe even other projects. Like we've talked about, Private Internet Access is coming out with an anonymous cloud storage service that I think is really, really cool. We've mentioned that on a Sovereign Tech episode. So, yeah, I would fund attitudes. I'd be more willing to fund attitudes than so much what gets reported in the news. But again, any of these would really be fine. That's really all I can say on that. But even private internet access can pull bullshit, right? Where they, they hired Mark Karpelis, of Mt. Gox as CTO. What the fuck? That's the weirdest damn thing in the world. But again, ultimately, any of those three that you go with, I think you're going to be fine. This does speak well of ExpressVPN, and does it lend me to recommending them? sure, if you want to recommend them. And hell, if you want to go with them, maybe go find out what Security Now's reference code is for, or promo code is for it, and give Steve Gibson a few bucks, because he's doing he's doing the Dark Lord's work over there. So, but yeah, I mean that's what I got. I mean, ultimately, arguably, maybe the best VPN you could use is actually the one from RiseUp, from riseup.net. Because that's, talk about proper attitude. But they offer theirs for free. But then I also would tell you, don't do it for free. Give them make a monthly donation to them, to thank them for what they're operating and running. So any of those four, well, I guess now, yeah, all four of those sound great. I think I'd like to see a couple more cases with ExpressVPN where that would lead me to like really trust them a bit more. But yeah, I mean, you raise a fair point, and I've brought this point up before, that really with any of these VPNs, we're basically taking them at their word that they're not keeping logs. They can even say that they're not keeping logs, like I said, but they really could be. And well, I mean, we don't exactly have ways to prove that. I mean, there have been third parties have come in, and done audits on private internet access and so on. But, how much do you trust those? I mean, there's always some degree of trust involved. But VPNs are important. In fact, something that was interesting. So I have been fooling around with Google Fi recently, their telco service, okay, for varying reasons. And part of this, I want to be able to report on it as a tech journalist. I've mentioned this already before. What's interesting is that if you have Android 9 or Pi, with Google Fi, Google has their own VPN that they want you to have running at all times, whether you're connected to cellular data or to Wi-Fi. And they sell it to you as they want you to do this for security and other reasons. Okay. Now there's a few advantages to this, right? But it raises an interesting point. Of course, for Google, they get all of your data, right? Because it's going to their servers. But it's interesting that Google wants you to have that on. It's in beta right now, but they want you to have that on. It does use a little more data. They warned you about that. Okay. But the way Google Fi's pay structure is, that doesn't really matter much. But it does use a little more data, but like that keeps it from that data going to the telco towers that Fi runs off of, which are Sprint and T-Mobile, right? And also the ISPs, whatever Wi-Fi, that you connect to. So, I mean, yeah, it's all going to go to Google, but it's interesting that Google's selling that to you as privacy and security. Basically, they're saying is that running a VPN at all times is a good fucking idea. That's the irony here. Okay, is that Google is absolute. I mean, and Google, of course, they open sourced their VPN implementation, their Open VPN implementation, and to where you could set that up on your own server if you wanted. Which we talked about that when that was released. That was earlier in 2018, which is really cool. I mean, it's totally open source. It doesn't matter if you put Google's branding on it. The code is the code. But anyway, I find it so ironic that Google, and right now it's in beta and you have to opt into it. But I bet as soon as that's out of beta, Google wants you running that at all times. And there could be some nefarious things around that, because like basically one of the best ways to run an ad blocker on Android right now is to run a VPN that is set up to block ads. And you can't run more than one VPN at a time on these things, or on any device really. And so, they want to make sure you're getting the ads, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to Google collecting all of your data and it not going to the telcos. Okay. There's no reason that it doesn't have to go to both, but in this, it's really, really hammering that point home. But regardless, even in their message, it's proving a point. And it's something that I personally do as well. I always run a VPN. Always, always, always. Okay. And Google is telling you basically to do the fucking same thing. I think that's hilarious. I mean, even like some of the features coming in with Android Q, the next version of Android, Mac ID randomization. I mean, there's so many security features getting baked into that. Things that if you were doing just a couple of years ago, or even just a year ago, that if you were doing and implementing on your own device by yourself, you'd be called a kook. You'd be called a kook. You'd be called paranoid. You'd be called all these things. Google is making a feature. They're turning it into a feature in their very own devices and services and operating systems and software, It's hilarious. I mean, So anyway, if anybody says you're nuts for running a VPN all the time, tell them to go fucking talk to Google about you running about running a VPN all the time, because they're baking that right into their own cellular service, for fuck's sake. So anyway, kind of got off topic on that, but that's the score. So, all right, why don't we get into our album of the week for this week? And what we've got here is an album that came out about a month ago. Like I said, 2019 has just been crazy. There's so many albums I have lined up to talk about. And I'm actually trying to get these guys in for an interview, or at least some of the members of the band. And it's a band called The End Machine. And again, the title, the album is a self-title, so it's titled also The End Machine. And this is basically, okay, and for those that know what I'm about to say, this should excite you. For those that don't know, might not make a whole ton of sense, but just trust me on this. So this is basically Dokken without Don Dokken. Now, stop. I know you're saying, what the fuck is Dokken without Don Dokken? Because remember when Don Dokken did Up From the Ashes in 94, and that sounded more like a Dokken album than Dokken had in a little bit. All right. I love Don Dokken. I love Don Dokken, and I love the band Dokken. I am a huge fucking fan of Dokken. Believe me, if I could have, I would have went to Japan. Was that last year when they did those 3 nights of reunion shows? They even recorded a new song that was like a #1 hit in Japan, because Japanese have tastes where Americans don't. Man, I would have been there in a heartbeat. Anyway, the End Machine is George Lynch, of course, classic guitarist from Dokken, of course, who also does the Lynch Mob, but George Lynch, Jeff Pilson, and Mick Brown. Yep, that, wild man Mick Brown. Okay. And Robert Mason. So Robert Mason might be the name you don't know. Robert Mason had taken over on lead vocals for Warrant after the passing of Janie Lane. And guy has just great pipes. Really, really does. So you basically have Dokken with a different frontman. However, this does not really sound like a Dokken album. Okay, George Lynch is there. It doesn't sound like a Lynch Mob album either. This just sounds like very fresh hard rock. And there's right from the first track, A Leap of Faith, Hold Me Down, the second track is fucking awesome. There is a lot of fun to be had with this album, The End Machine. So the band itself has done some dates, so they're trying to make it seem like this is a very serious band. You can't really get Dokken together without putting a ton of money in front of them, which is basically what allowed for that little mini tour in Japan last year. But, I don't want, the guys in Dokken sound awesome. In fact, in that new song, some people, were saying how, well, Don Dokken's vocals might have not exactly been up to snuff, but, fucking George Lynch and Pilson, they sound amazing. And so you get in my opinion, you get a great time with this album, and I really loved it. Bulletproof might be my favorite song off of there. Alive Today was really solid too. It's not exactly track for track, but there's a lot of really, really good, rough riffs, shall we say, that George Lynch generally provides. So even though it doesn't exactly sound like Dokken, it's still, it doesn't have kind of the tinniness and sort of the, I almost want to call it overproduction. But I don't say that as a disrespect, because overproduction can be a good thing. Think Mutt Lange, right? With various Def Leppard albums and so on. Yeah, it doesn't have that overproduction sound that a lot of Dokken albums would have, where the treble seemed to be turned up to 20, but you still have just the amazing talent of those members of Dokken there, and you feel it. This is quality stuff. And again, they have gotten together. I don't think Mick was actually touring with them, but they have done shows trying to say, no, this is a very real band and we're going forward. And why not? Warrant isn't exactly lighting any fires, I think, right now on anybody. And Robert Mason has a great voice, so fucking let it happen. George Lynch still plays like a beast. Jeff Pilson, of course, if you listen, I haven't done this album yet. This is going to be an album of the week at some point, but the second Last in Line album came out, and Pilson was all over that. I think he was doing production duties on the Last in Line album. That album, Last in Line 2, is fucking great. And I'm just based on the sound, I'm kind of going to guess that Pilson had something to do with the production on this one as well. And the producer can make everything. In fact, we recently talked about the latest Tesla record. And on that, Phil Collin was the producer, Phil Collin of Def Leppard, and you totally got a Def Leppard sound from Tesla, and it was fucking awesome. So was that Simplicity? Anyway, whatever. So yeah, I recommend checking out the End Machine. This was one of the albums I was actually really excited for to come out in 2019. It didn't really disappoint. I mean, I didn't have like the highest expectations for it, but it definitely exceeded what I was thinking this was going to be. And it's not just some supergroup thing. I mean, it just really feels like an evolution of Dokken in a very good way. I mean, do I still want classic sounding Dokken? Yeah, give that to me all day, because I'll listen to it all day. But I'll take this as well. So check it out. If you're a fan of Dokken especially, you're really going to get a treat here with the End Machine. But it's just great straight up hard rock. And some of it's actually a lot of fun. Like the last track on it, what was it? Life is Love is Music. That's literally Life is Love is Music. Couldn't agree more. But life is love. And is love music? Well, you could listen to Richard Marx and tell me that ain't love. But so, yeah, if you're into, if this is your speed, this is your type of music, some hard rock and even getting into, somewhat heavier or slightly heavy metal, this is an album for you. The End Machine by The End Machine. Check it out. It's so great. I mean, I love George Lynch. To hear him, jam a guitar, I am so on board with that anytime he wants to do it. So, all right, that's it. We'll wrap up this Zomia ONE Underground Q&A for this week. Tons and tons and tons of stuff to come out in April. I have so much that I'm just editing now, and more that I'm writing, because some of this stuff needs to be scripted. So, but believe me, it'll turn out great. You just wait. Anyway, there we go. So I will see all of you on the other side.